The kitchen looked like a tornado had touched down specifically on the dinner table. Naomi stood in the doorway of her home, grocery bags still in her hands, staring at the wreckage of what had been her carefully prepared lasagna. Cheese and sauce dripped down the cabinet doors. Broken dishes littered the floor. The twins' art project for school, which she'd spent 2 hours helping them complete the night before, lay torn and soggy in the middle of the mess. Ethan and Elijah stood in the corner, tears streaming down their 6-year-old faces. Her heart clenched at the sight of them. What happened? Naomi set down the bags slowly, trying to keep her voice calm even as anger bubbled in her chest. Claire and Paige said we couldn't eat until they were done playing their game, Elijah whispered. We were hungry. We tried to get the food ourselves. Naomi looked at the destroyed kitchen and felt something crack inside her chest. This was the 4th incident this month. For times she'd come home to find her sons upset, the house in disarray, and Richard's daughters nowhere to be found. She'd spent 5 years trying to blend this family, bending herself into impossible shapes, and it never seemed to be enough. She heard footsteps on the stairs. 12-year-old Claire appeared first, phone in hand, barely glancing at the destruction. 10-year-old Paige followed, wearing earbuds and singing off-key to whatever music filled her ears. Girls, Naomi said quietly, can you explain what happened here? Claire shrugged. We were just playing. Not our fault they're clumsy. You were supposed to heat up dinner for everyone at 6. It's 7:30. The boys were hungry. Whatever, Paige muttered, pulling out one earbud. We forgot. Naomi felt her patience, worn thin over years of small dismissals and casual cruelty, finally snap. This isn't acceptable. You're both old enough to follow simple instructions. You're old enough to be kind to your brothers. They're not our brothers, Claire said, her voice cold in a way that made Naomi's stomach turn. We're a family, Naomi said, her voice shaking now. That means we take care of each other. That means we show respect. You both need to clean this up right now and apologize to Ethan and Elijah. Make us, Paige said, and both girls laughed. Before Naomi could respond, the front door opened. Richard walked in, briefcase in hand, tie loosened. He took in the scene with a quick glance and immediately his face hardened. What's going on? He asked. Your daughters destroyed the kitchen and upset the boys, Naomi said, trying to keep her voice level. I'm asking them to clean it up and apologize. Richard looked at his daughters, then at Naomi. His expression didn't soften. Were you yelling at them? I was addressing the situation. It sounds like you were scolding them. He turned to Claire and Paige. Go upstairs, girls. They didn't hesitate, practically skipping past Naomi with smug smiles that made her blood boil. Richard, they need to take responsibility for this. They're kids, Naomi. So are Ethan and Elijah, but you don't see them destroying the house. Richard's jaw tightened. He set his briefcase down with more force than necessary. Here we go again. Every time I come home, you're upset about something the girls did. Because every time you come home, there's something new to be upset about. They're not toddlers anymore. They know better. They're adjusting. Their mother left 2 years ago. They need patience. I've been patient for 5 years, Richard. 5 years of putting them first, of swallowing every slight, every bit of disrespect. 5 years of watching you defend behavior you'd never accept from my sons. That's different. How? How is it different? Richard stepped closer, his face flushed with anger. You know what? I'm tired of coming home to this. I work all day to provide for this family, and all you do is complain about my daughters. I'm not complaining. I'm trying to raise them with some sense of accountability. Don't scold my daughters, Richard said, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Take care of your own. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Naomi felt them hit her chest, each syllable a small knife. Ethan and Elijah stood frozen in the corner, watching their mother's face change from anger to something else entirely. Something hollow. Take care of my own, Naomi repeated softly. You heard me. I'm their father. I'll handle my daughters. You focus on your boys. Naomi looked at this man she'd loved, this man she'd married, this man she'd rearranged her entire life to accommodate. She saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. He'd never seen her as an equal partner. She'd been a convenience, a housekeeper, a caretaker for his children while he maintained his comfortable life. Okay, she said quietly. Richard blinked, surprised by her sudden calm. Okay. Yes, you're absolutely right. She turned to her sons. Ethan, Elijah, go pack your bags. Bring your favorite toys and your school clothes. Naomi, what are you doing? Richard asked. Taking care of my own. She walked past him without another glance, her sons following close behind. In their bedroom, she helped them pack while Richard stood in the doorway, watching with growing unease. "This is ridiculous. Where are you going?" "That's not your concern anymore. You're my wife." Naomi paused, a small shirt folded in her hands. "Am I?" "Because for the last 5 years, I felt more like an employee you're chronically disappointed in." "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. You just told me to take care of my own. So that's exactly what I'm doing." She zipped up the boys' bags and took their hands. They walked down the stairs together, past Richard who seemed frozen, unable to process what was happening. She grabbed her purse and car keys. "Naomi, wait. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You drew your line. Your daughter's on one side, my son's on the other. I'm choosing my side. You're overreacting to one comment." She turned to face him one last time. "This wasn't one comment, Richard. This was 5 years of comments. 5 years of dismissals. 5 years of watching you choose them over everyone else while I held everything together. I'm done." "So you're just going to leave? Walk out on our marriage?" "You walked out on our marriage a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting it." She opened the door, the night air cool on her face. Ethan and Elijah climbed into the car quietly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Naomi looked back at the house once, seeing Richard silhouetted in the doorway, still not moving, still not believing this was real. She started the engine. Her hands shook slightly on the wheel, but her resolve was steel. She'd been drowning slowly for years, and tonight he'd finally pushed her head under the water one last time. But instead of drowning, she decided to swim away. As she drove toward the highway, her phone began to ring. Richard's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call. Then another. Declined. By the 5th call, she pulled over, blocked his number, and sat in the darkness for a long moment. "Mama?" Elijah's small voice came from the back seat. "Are we going to Aunt Beverly's?" Naomi looked at her sons in the rearview mirror. Their faces were scared but trusting. They believed she would take care of them. They believed she would make things right. And suddenly she knew she would. "Yes, baby. We're going to Aunt Beverly's." "For how long?" Naomi took a deep breath, feeling something like freedom flutter in her chest for the first time in years. "For as long as we need." She pulled back onto the highway, leaving the city lights behind her, driving toward Charleston and her aunt's house and a life she couldn't quite picture yet but knew would be hers. Whatever happened next, she was done being invisible. Done being dismissed. Done taking care of everyone except herself and her children. Richard would realize eventually what he'd lost. But by then Naomi would be someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who finally remembered her worth. The drive to Charleston took 4 hours. Naomi drove through the darkness with only the radio playing softly, keeping her mind focused on the white lines of the highway instead of the life she was leaving behind. Ethan and Elijah fell asleep in the back seat within the first hour, exhausted from the emotional evening. She glanced at them in the rearview mirror periodically, their peaceful faces reminding her why she'd finally found the strength to leave. Around midnight, she pulled up to Aunt Beverly's small blue house with the white shutters and wraparound porch. The porch light was on, and before Naomi could even turn off the engine, the front door opened. Aunt Beverly stood there in her robe, arms crossed, but her face soft with concern. At 58, she still moved like a woman 20 years younger, hurrying down the porch steps as Naomi stepped out of the car. "Baby girl," Beverly said simply, pulling Naomi into a hug that immediately brought tears to her eyes. "I'm sorry for showing up so late. I should have called first, but I just needed to leave. I needed to get out of there before I lost my nerve." "Hush now. You called me 3 hours ago. I've been waiting. Knew you'd come." Beverly pulled back to look at Naomi's face. "You finally did it. He told me to take care of my own. Like my sons weren't part of his family. Like I wasn't part of his family." Beverly's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Then he's a fool. Come on, let's get these babies inside. You can tell me everything tomorrow." They carried the sleeping boys into the house, laying them in the guest room that still smelled like lavender and old books. Beverly had already made up the beds with fresh sheets. Naomi felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly knocked her over. In the kitchen, Beverly made tea while Naomi sat at the worn wooden table she remembered from childhood visits. The house hadn't changed much. Same floral curtains. Same ceramic rooster collection on the shelf. Same feeling of safety. "I planned this," Naomi said quietly. "Not tonight specifically, but I've been planning to leave for 3 months. Beverly set a cup of chamomile tea in front of her. "Tell me." "I opened a separate bank account. Saved money from the freelance consulting work I'd been doing on the side. Richard didn't even know I was working again. He thought I was just at home all day doing nothing important. She laughed bitterly. I've been sending my important documents here. My birth certificate, the boys' records, everything. I knew if I was going to leave, I needed to be smart about it. That's my girl. Smart and strong just like your mama was. I don't feel strong. I feel like I wasted 5 years of my life. No time is wasted if you learn from it. And you learned what you will and won't accept. That's worth something. Naomi sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. What do I do now? Now, you rest. Tomorrow you start building. You've got skills, you've got your boys, and you've got me. That's more than enough to begin with. They talked until nearly 2 in the morning. Naomi told her aunt everything. The small dismissals that had grown into large ones. The way Richard never defended her in front of his daughters. The way he'd stopped touching her, stopped seeing her, stopped treating her like a partner. The way she'd shrunk herself smaller and smaller trying to fit into a family that never wanted to make room for her. Finally, Beverly stood and pulled Naomi to her feet. Come on. You need sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard when he realizes you're serious. She was right. Naomi's phone, which she'd left in her purse, showed 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages by morning. She read through them while Ethan and Elijah ate pancakes with Aunt Beverly. The messages followed a predictable pattern. First anger, then confusion, then bargaining, then more anger. Finally, around 3 in the morning, something that almost resembled understanding. Naomi, please come home. We can talk about this. I didn't mean what I said. You're being irrational. She deleted them all without responding. Then she composed one simple text message. I left a note on the kitchen counter. That's all the explanation you need. My lawyer will be in contact soon. Don't call me again. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then blocked his number permanently across all platforms. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Naomi met with Simone, her college friend who'd become a successful divorce attorney. Simone's office was sleek and professional, much like the woman herself. I've been waiting for this call for 2 years, Simone said, pulling out a legal pad. Tell me everything and don't leave out details. I need ammunition. Naomi told her everything. The financial control. The way Richard had convinced her to quit her job to stay home with all 4 children, then resented her for not contributing financially. The joint accounts she had no real access to. The credit cards in her name he'd maxed out without telling her. The way he'd undermined every decision she made about household matters. Simone's pen moved rapidly across the page. This is good. Well, not good for you but good for the case. Financial abuse is absolutely a factor we can use. What about evidence? Naomi pulled out a folder she'd been compiling for months. Bank statements. Emails. Printed text conversations. A log she'd kept of every incident with his daughters, every time he'd dismissed her concerns, every promise he'd broken. You've been planning this, Simone said, impressed. I'm not stupid. I knew if I was going to leave, I needed to protect myself and my boys. Richard is the type to make things difficult. Then we'll make things more difficult for him. I'll file the separation papers this week. We'll ask for temporary spousal support, child support for your twins, and primary custody. Given the evidence here of financial control and emotional neglect, I think we have a strong case. Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi established a new routine. She enrolled Ethan and Elijah in a small public school near Beverly's house. They adjusted remarkably well, making friends quickly and seeming lighter without the tension of their old home. She registered her consulting business officially, creating an LLC and building a website. The work she'd been doing quietly for months became her full-time focus. Her first major client came through a referral, and suddenly she had income of her own again. Real income that didn't require asking permission or justifying expenses. She attended therapy twice a week, unpacking years of suppressed anger and hurt. Her therapist, Dr. Green, helped her understand that what she'd experienced was a form of emotional abuse. You were systematically made to feel like your needs didn't matter, Dr. Green said during one session. That's not a partnership. That's subordination. I let it happen though. I stayed. You stayed because you loved him. Because you believed in your family. Because you hoped things would change. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But recognizing when hope becomes harmful and choosing yourself? That takes tremendous strength. Richard tried other ways to reach her. He sent emails to her old account, which she had Simone handle. He mailed letters to Beverly's house, which Beverly returned unopened. He even called Naomi's mother, who lived overseas, trying to get her to intervene. Her mother called Naomi, and after hearing the full story, told Richard to leave her daughter alone. "I'm proud of you," her mother said over video chat. "I was worried about that marriage from the start. You gave it your all, baby. That's more than he deserved." The separation papers were served at Richard's workplace. According to Simone, he'd been furious, claiming Naomi was being vindictive. But when he saw the evidence compiled against him, his tune changed. He couldn't deny the bank statements. Couldn't explain away the emails where he'd berated her for spending money on groceries. Couldn't justify the way he'd isolated her from her own finances. One evening, about 3 weeks after she'd left, Naomi sat on Beverly's porch watching Ethan and Elijah play in the yard. The spring air was sweet with jasmine, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. "You look different," Beverly said, settling into the rocking chair beside her. "I feel different. Lighter somehow. That's what happens when you put down a weight you've been carrying too long. You remember what it feels like to breathe." Naomi smiled. "I forgot who I was. For 5 years I was Richard's wife, Claire, and Paige's stepmother, the woman who managed the household. But I forgot I was Naomi. Just me. And who is Naomi? I'm still figuring that out. But whoever she is, she's not going back to being invisible. Not ever again." Beverly reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's my girl. That's my strong, beautiful girl." That night, Naomi wrote one last message to Richard through the lawyer's portal. Not out of anger, but out of closure. "I don't hate you. I don't even blame you entirely. We both created the dynamic that broke us. But I do thank you for those final words. They were cruel, but they were also clarity. They showed me what I'd been refusing to see for years. I wasn't your partner. I was your convenience, and I deserve more than that. So do my sons. I hope you figure out what kind of father and man you want to be. But I won't be there to watch. I'm building something new now, something that's mine. I wish you well, but I wish myself better." She sent it and closed her laptop, feeling the last thread of connection snap cleanly. Tomorrow she had a meeting with a potential new client. Next week, the boys had their first soccer game. In a month, she'd signed the lease on a small office space downtown. The life ahead was uncertain, but it was hers. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Richard stared at the empty house like it was a stranger's home. For the first 3 days after Naomi left, he'd convinced himself she'd come back. Women got emotional, said things they didn't mean, took space to cool down. That's what his father had always told him. Give them a day or two and they'd come crawling back. But Naomi didn't come back. By day 4, anger replaced his certainty. How dare she walk out like that? How dare she take the boys without discussing it properly? He tried calling, texting, even reaching out to her mother. All paths led to silence. On day 7, the separation papers arrived at his office. His secretary brought them in during a meeting, and he'd had to excuse himself to process what he was seeing. Dissolution of marriage. Temporary spousal support. Child support. Primary custody of the minor children Ethan and Elijah Brooks. He'd called 6 different lawyers that afternoon. The last one, a sharp woman named Patricia Harding, reviewed his case and gave it to him straight. "Mr. Brooks, based on what you're telling me and what I'm seeing in these documents, your wife has been building this case for months. She has documentation of financial control, email evidence of belittling communication, and witness statements about the home environment. Unless you have counter evidence showing she's an unfit mother, you're not going to win a custody battle. And frankly, you shouldn't try." "Those are my sons too," he'd said. "Stepchildren," Patricia corrected. "Legally, you have no custody rights to them at all. She's being generous, even allowing supervised visitation in the proposal." That conversation had felt like a punch to the gut. He hadn't realized until that moment that Ethan and Elijah, the boys he'd lived with for 5 years, weren't legally his children at all. Naomi had never pursued a step-parent adoption, probably because he'd never shown much interest in the process. Another thing he'd taken for granted. The house fell apart within 2 weeks. Claire and Paige, without Naomi there to maintain structure, ran wild. They stayed up until all hours, left dishes everywhere, refused to do homework. Richard, working full-time and trying to manage everything, found himself drowning. "Girls, you need to clean your rooms," he'd say. "What? Naomi's not here to nag us about it," Claire would respond. "I'm still your father." "Then act like it. You never cared what we did before when she was here." It was true, and the truth stung. He'd let Naomi handle everything related to the home and children while he focused on work and his own comfort. Now, facing the chaos alone, he understood for the first time how much she'd actually managed. One evening about 3 weeks after Naomi left, Richard found himself in the master bedroom they'd shared. It still smelled faintly of her perfume. He opened her closet, seeing the empty spaces where her clothes had been. Then he noticed a box on the top shelf, partially hidden behind his old golf clubs. Curious, he pulled it down. Inside were journals, dozens of them, covering the entire 5 years of their marriage. He sat on the bed and opened the first one. The early entries were hopeful. Excited. Naomi had written about their wedding, about her dreams for blending their family, about her love for him. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. Tried to talk to Richard about Claire's behavior at dinner. She threw food at Elijah and called him stupid. Richard said she was just teasing. When I pushed back, he got angry and said I was being too sensitive. I don't know how to reach him. Richard's chest tightened. He remembered that night. Remembered dismissing Naomi's concerns because he'd been tired from work and didn't want to deal with conflict. He kept reading. Richard closed another credit card today without telling me. Said we needed to cut expenses, but I saw the charge for his golf club membership renewal. When I asked about it, he said his recreation was important for his stress levels. What about my stress? What about the fact that I can't even buy groceries without checking with him first? Page after page revealed a woman slowly breaking under the weight of neglect. Not dramatic abuse. Not violence or obvious cruelty. Just the steady erosion of dignity, respect, and partnership. Death by 1,000 small cuts. I don't recognize myself anymore. I used to be confident, successful, happy. Now I spend my days walking on eggshells, trying to keep peace in a house where I'm treated like the help. Richard looks through me, not at me. His daughters have learned from him. I'm the woman who cleans their messes and cooks their food, but I'm not their family. And I'm starting to realize I'm not Richard's family either. I'm just convenient. Richard set down that journal and opened one from just 3 months ago. The entries were different now. Less emotional, more factual. Lists of documents she'd gathered. Records of conversations. A plan taking shape. I love Richard. I think I'll always love some version of him. But I can't stay here and lose myself completely. For my son's sake, for my own sake, I need to leave. I'm scared, but I'm more scared of staying. Of teaching Ethan and Elijah that this is what love looks like. That women should accept being minimized. That their needs don't matter. I won't do that to them. The final entry was dated the day before she left. Tomorrow or soon the moment will come. Something will happen that makes the decision easy. I'm ready. I've planned everything. I have money saved, a place to go, a lawyer ready. I'm just waiting for the clarity. For the universe to confirm what I already know. That I deserve better. That we deserve better. Richard closed the journal and sat in the silence of his empty room. For the first time since Naomi had walked out, he truly understood what he'd lost. Not just a wife who managed his home. Not just a caretaker for his children. But a partner who had loved him deeply, who had tried repeatedly to reach him, who had bent herself into impossible shapes trying to make him happy. And he'd responded by telling her to take care of her own. He thought about Claire and Paige, about the way he'd let them treat Naomi. The way he'd defended their cruelty as adjustment or childhood innocence. He saw clearly now that he'd taught them that women could be disrespected without consequence. That Naomi's feelings, her needs, her entire existence could be dismissed. What kind of father was he, teaching his daughters that? The next day Richard called his ex-wife, the girl's mother. They hadn't spoken directly in over a year, but he needed answers. Did you encourage Claire and Paige to disrespect Naomi? He asked without preamble. His ex-wife Jennifer laughed. Not a happy sound. Took you long enough to figure it out? Of course I did. You replaced me with her. Why would I help her succeed at raising my children? They're not babies anymore, Jennifer. You left 2 years ago. You barely visit. Naomi was there every day trying to care for them, and you were in their ears poisoning them against her? Oh please, don't make me the villain because your second wife got tired of your nonsense. I put up with it for 12 years. Seems like she had a lower tolerance. The call ended badly, but it confirmed what Richard had started to suspect. He'd been complicit in a campaign to undermine Naomi, whether consciously or not. His daughters had learned from both their parents that it was acceptable to treat her as less than. That night, he sat Claire and Paige down at the kitchen table. Pizza boxes lay open between them, because he still hadn't figured out how to cook proper meals. Girls, we need to talk about Naomi. What about her? Claire asked, not looking up from her phone. About how we treated her. How I let you treat her. Paige shrugged. She's not our mom. No, she's not. But she was trying to be your family. And we made that impossible. I made that impossible. Why are you defending her now? She left, Claire said, finally meeting his eyes. She left because we gave her no reason to stay. Because I didn't protect her or respect her. Because I taught you both that it was okay to treat her badly. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I failed her, and I'm sorry I failed you by teaching you the wrong lessons. The girls were quiet for a long moment. Then Paige, the younger one, said softly, sometimes I felt bad. When we'd be mean and she'd get that look on her face. But Mom said it was okay. Said she was trying to replace Mom. Your mother is your mother. Nothing will change that. But Naomi wasn't trying to replace her. She was just trying to love you in her own way. And none of us let her. Is she coming back? Claire asked, and for the first time Richard heard something vulnerable in her voice. No. And she shouldn't. We have to figure out how to be better without expecting her to come back and fix us. That conversation marked a turning point. Richard started therapy the following week. His therapist helped him understand his patterns of control, his fear of vulnerability, his tendency to prioritize comfort over connection. He worked with Claire and Paige on their behavior, got them into counseling to deal with their parents' divorce and their role in Naomi's departure. It wasn't easy. They acted out worse before they got better. But slowly, grudgingly, they began to understand the weight of their actions. Richard tried once more to reach Naomi. He wrote her a letter, a real one on paper, and sent it through her lawyer. In it, he apologized. Not the shallow apology of someone trying to manipulate their way back into a relationship, but a genuine accounting of his failures. I see now what I couldn't see before. I made you invisible in your own home. I prioritized my comfort over your dignity. I taught my daughters that women exist to serve men, and I allowed them to treat you as less than human. There's no excuse for it. No explanation that makes it right. I can only tell you that I'm sorry, and that I'm working to become someone better. Not for you because I know you're done with me. But for my daughters so they don't grow up to treat their partners the way I treated you. And maybe one day for myself. Simone called him after Naomi received the letter. She read it, the lawyer said. She doesn't want to see you or speak to you, but she wanted you to know she read it. She said to tell you that she accepts your apology, but acceptance doesn't mean reconciliation. She hopes you continue your work on yourself for your daughter's sake. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. It was the closure Richard hadn't realized he needed. As the weeks turned into months and the divorce proceedings continued, Richard slowly built a new life. One where he was actually present for his daughters. One where he cooked meals and helped with homework and set boundaries. One where he showed up as a father, not just a provider. But late at night, in the house that never felt quite right without Naomi's presence, he understood a truth that settled in his bones like winter cold. He'd had something real, something valuable, and he'd treated it like it was disposable. Now he'd have to live with that knowledge for the rest of his life. Naomi stood in front of the mirror in Aunt Beverly's bathroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. She'd cut her hair, letting go of the long braids Richard had preferred, and now natural curls framed her face in a way that felt more authentically her. She wore a blue dress she'd bought for herself with her own money, no one to answer to about the expense. "You look beautiful," Beverly said from the doorway. "Like yourself again. I feel like myself. Or maybe like a new version of myself. Someone who's both the old Naomi and something different. That's called growth, baby. Wear it well." Naomi was heading to Charleston's downtown arts district for a gallery opening. One of her consulting clients had invited her, and she'd almost declined out of habit. The old Naomi would have worried about leaving the boys too long, about what Richard would say, about whether she deserved an evening for herself. The new Naomi had hired a babysitter, kissed her sons goodbye, and walked out the door with her head high. The gallery was a converted warehouse with exposed brick and high ceilings. Art covered every wall, colorful and bold. People mingled with wine glasses, their voices creating a pleasant hum of conversation. Naomi accepted a glass of white wine from a server and began to wander through the space. She stopped in front of a painting that caught her attention. It showed a woman emerging from water, her face tilted toward the sun. Something about it resonated deeply, like looking at a visual representation of her own journey. "That's one of my favorites," a voice said beside her. Naomi turned to find a man studying the painting with equal interest. He was tall, with dark skin, close-cropped hair, and an easy smile. He wore slacks and a green button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. "It's powerful," Naomi said. "Like she's being reborn." That's exactly what the artist intended. The whole series is about transformation. About becoming who you were always meant to be. He extended his hand. "Troy Mitchell." I own the gallery. Naomi Brooks. I'm here with the Harrison Group. Ah, you're the consultant everyone's talking about. Rebecca says you're a genius with strategic planning. Naomi felt herself blush. That's generous. I just help people organize their chaos. They talked for the next hour, first about art, then about business, and finally about life. Troy had opened the gallery 3 years ago after leaving a career in corporate finance. He talked about the risk, the fear, and the ultimate satisfaction of building something that reflected his true passions. What about you? He asked. What brought you to Charleston? A fresh start, Naomi said carefully. Sometimes you need to leave one life behind to find another. Troy nodded like he understood there was more to the story but wouldn't push. Fresh starts can be good. Scary but good. Terrifying, Naomi admitted. But better than staying in a place where you're slowly disappearing. That sounds like a story. It is. But not one for tonight. She smiled. Tonight, I'm just a woman enjoying art and conversation. Fair enough. Troy pulled a card from his pocket. I'm actually looking for someone to help me expand the gallery. Strategic planning, community outreach, that sort of thing. If you're interested, call me. We can talk details. Naomi took the card, feeling opportunity flutter in her chest. I'll think about it. Think hard. You strike me as someone who'd be good at making beautiful things successful. When Naomi returned home that night, she found Aunt Beverly still awake, reading in the living room. Ethan and Elijah were asleep, worn out from a day of playing in the backyard. Good time? Beverly asked. Surprisingly good. I met someone who wants to hire me for a project. Gallery expansion. That's wonderful. You taking it? Maybe. Probably. I don't know. Naomi sat down beside her aunt. Is it strange that I'm scared of good things happening? Not strange at all. You spent 5 years having good things taken away or dismissed. Now you're learning to trust again. Give yourself time. Over the next few weeks, Naomi met with Troy twice more to discuss the gallery project. His vision was clear and exciting. He wanted to create programming for young artists, establish community partnerships, and position the gallery as a cultural hub in Charleston. I love this, Naomi said, reviewing his preliminary plans. But you need structure. Timelines, budget allocations, measurable goals. That's why I need you. They worked well together. Troy was creative and passionate, while Naomi brought organization and pragmatism. She created a comprehensive plan, complete with funding strategies and community engagement models. Troy was thrilled. This is exactly what I needed. You've taken my scattered ideas and made them real. That's what I do, Naomi said, surprised by the pride in her voice. I make things real. Meanwhile, life with Ethan and Elijah settled into a comfortable rhythm. They loved their new school, loved living with Aunt Beverly, loved the freedom of Charleston. They asked about Richard sometimes, and Naomi always answered honestly. Your stepfather and I aren't together anymore. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It just means our family looks different now. Are we going to see him? Elijah asked. Eventually, when things are more settled. Right now, we're building our new life here. The boys seemed to accept this. They were resilient in the way children often are, especially when removed from a tense environment. Naomi noticed they laughed more now, played more freely, slept through the night without nightmares. One Saturday afternoon, Troy invited Naomi and the boys to an art workshop at the gallery. It was designed for families, with simple projects that even young children could enjoy. Ethan and Elijah painted with abandon, creating colorful abstracts that Troy praised enthusiastically. You've got 2 young artists here, he told Naomi. They're just having fun. That's what art is. Joyful expression. He watched as Elijah added another splash of red paint to his canvas. How are you settling into Charleston? Better than I expected. It feels like home in a way my old life never quite did. What was your old life like? Naomi hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion. I was married to a man who made me feel invisible. Lived in a house where I was tolerated but not valued. Spent 5 years trying to be enough for people who would never see me as enough. Troy was quiet for a moment. That must have been lonely. It was. But I'm not lonely anymore. I'm alone sometimes, but that's different. Better. And what made you finally leave? He told me to take care of my own. Like my children and I were separate from his family. Like we were visitors in our own home. And I realized I'd been living like a visitor for years. Always careful, always trying not to take up too much space. I was done being small. Good, Troy said firmly. The world has enough people trying to make others small. We need more people taking up space. demanding their place. Something about his words, his certainty made Naomi smile. You barely know me. How do you know I deserve to take up space? Because everyone does. And because in the few weeks I've known you, I've watched you light up when you talk about your work, your kids, your future. People who deserve to be small don't light up like that. They shrink. You're expanding. It was one of the kindest things anyone had said to her in years. As spring turned to early summer, Naomi's consulting business grew. She took on 3 more clients, all referrals from satisfied customers. Her work with Troy's gallery went so well that he offered her a permanent position as operations director. Think about it, he said. I know you're building your own business, but this could be a stable foundation. Salary, benefits, flexibility to still take consulting clients. And I think we work well together. We do, Naomi agreed. Let me consider it. That night, she made a list of pros and cons, something she'd learned in therapy to help with big decisions. The pros column was longer. Stability, steady income, work she enjoyed, a boss who respected her. The cons were mostly fears. Fear of committing again. Fear of depending on someone else's vision. Fear of losing her independence. She called Simone for advice. Take the job, Simone said without hesitation. You've been freelancing for 3 months. It's been good for rebuilding your confidence, but you need stability, especially with the divorce proceedings ongoing. Plus, from what you've told me, Troy sounds like a decent human who values you professionally. What if I'm making a mistake? Then you'll make another choice later. Life isn't one decision that determines everything, Naomi. It's a series of choices. Make this one, see where it leads, and adjust as you go. The next day, Naomi accepted Troy's offer. They celebrated with coffee and pastries, mapping out her new role. I want to be clear about something, Troy said. I value you as a colleague and a friend. But I also think you're remarkable. And if, somewhere down the line when you're ready, you'd ever want to explore more than friendship, I'd be interested in that. But only if and when you're ready. No pressure. No expectations. Naomi appreciated his directness. I'm not ready. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being someone's wife. That's fair. The offer stands, no expiration date. For now, we make this gallery the best it can be. They shook on it and Naomi felt something settle in her chest. Not romance, not yet. But possibility. The possibility that someday when she'd fully healed, when she'd fully remembered her worth, there might be someone who saw her clearly and valued what he saw. That evening, watching Ethan and Elijah play in Beverly's backyard, their laughter floating on the summer air, Naomi felt contentment wash over her. Her life wasn't perfect. The divorce wasn't final. Money was still tight sometimes. She still had moments of doubt and fear. But she was free. Free to make choices. Free to build a life that reflected her values. Free to take up space. And that freedom, hard-won and precious, was worth everything. The private investigator's report lay on Richard's kitchen table, 3 pages that confirmed what he'd suspected. Naomi was in Charleston, living with her aunt, working at an art gallery and building a life that had no space for him. He'd hired the investigator against his lawyer's advice. Patricia had been clear. Following her or showing up unannounced will only hurt your case. Give her space. But Richard couldn't accept it. Couldn't accept that 5 years of marriage could end with such finality. Couldn't accept that Naomi had moved on while he was still drowning in the mess she'd left behind. So he got in his car and drove to Charleston. The house was easy to find. Small, blue with a porch that wrapped around the front. Richard parked across the street and watched. After 20 minutes, Naomi emerged with the boys, all 3 of them smiling, heading toward a car. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, curly. She wore a red sundress and sandals. She looked free. Richard got out of his car. Naomi, he called. She froze. The boys spotted him and their faces lit up briefly before confusion replaced the joy. Richard, Naomi said, her voice flat. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. We need to talk. We have lawyers for that. I don't want to talk through lawyers. I want to talk to you. My wife. Ex-wife. Or will be soon. She glanced at the boys. Go inside. Aunt Beverly is in the kitchen. Ethan and Elijah hesitated, looking between their mother and the man who'd been their stepfather. Finally, they went inside, casting worried glances over their shoulders. The front door opened again. An older woman emerged, arms crossed, eyes hard. You need to leave. Who are you? Beverly Harris. Naomi's aunt. And you're trespassing. I'm talking to my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife, who has a restraining order application ready to file if you don't respect her boundaries. Beverly's voice was steel. Leave. Now. Richard looked at Naomi, seeing no softness in her expression. No opening. No opportunity for the grand gesture he'd imagined during the 4-hour drive. Please, he said. Just give me 5 minutes. No, Naomi said simply. You showing up here proves exactly why I left. You don't respect my decisions. You don't respect my boundaries. You think you can push your way into my life because you've decided you want to talk. I'm trying to save our marriage. There's no marriage to save. You killed it slowly over 5 years and I finally buried it 3 months ago. Let it stay dead. What about the boys? Don't they deserve to have a father? They have me. They have stability. They have a home where they're valued. That's more than they had with you. The words hit like stones. Richard felt anger rise in his chest. You can't just take them away from me. I can actually, and I did. Because you never legally adopted them. Because you never showed real interest in being their father. You were content to have me raise them while you focused on your daughters. Well, now you can focus on your daughters completely. Naomi, please. I'm going to therapy. I'm working on myself. I see everything I did wrong. Good. Work on yourself. Become a better father to Claire and Paige. Become a better man for whoever comes after me. But don't expect me to wait around while you figure it out. I'm done being your practice run. Beverly stepped forward. I'm calling the police if you're not gone in 60 seconds. Richard looked at both women, seeing no path forward. He turned back to his car, but before he got in, he tried one more time. I love you. You love the idea of me, Naomi called back. You love having someone to manage your life. But you never loved me. Not really. Because if you had, you would have shown it when it mattered. Richard drove away, his hands shaking on the wheel. The rejection stung worse because he knew she was right. He'd loved having Naomi in his life, but he'd never truly valued her. Never truly seen her as an equal partner deserving of respect and consideration. Back home, he found the separation papers Simone had updated. The terms were clear. Naomi wanted nothing from him except to be left alone. She'd asked for minimal spousal support, just enough to stabilize while she built her business. She wanted no custody arrangement for Ethan and Elijah because Richard had no legal claim to them. She wanted the divorce finalized as quickly as possible. Patricia reviewed the papers with him. She's being more than fair. Most people in her position would ask for much more, especially given the financial control you exercised. I strongly advise you to sign. What if I fight it? Fight what? She has documentation of financial abuse. Character witnesses who'll testify to the toxic home environment. And you have nothing except the claim that you're working on yourself. No judge will side with you. You'll spend tens of thousands in legal fees and end up with the same result, just with more animosity. Richard signed the papers that afternoon. It felt like failure, but maybe that's what it was. Maybe he'd failed and this was the consequence. No redemption arc. No happy ending. Just the reality of loss. The following week, Richard received notice that he needed to vacate the house. It had been in Naomi's name before they married, inherited from her grandmother. He'd been living there by virtue of the marriage. Now, with the divorce pending, she wanted it back. She's giving you 60 days to find a place, Patricia explained. That's more than legally required. She could have demanded you leave immediately. Richard moved into an apartment with Claire and Paige. Downsizing meant getting rid of things, and every item he donated or sold felt like another piece of his old life being erased. The girls struggled with the transition. Claire's grades dropped. Paige started having nightmares. Their counselor explained that they were processing not just the divorce but their role in it. They're beginning to understand that their behavior contributed to the breakdown of your marriage, the counselor said. That's a heavy weight for children to carry. They need reassurance that it wasn't all their fault, but they also need to understand accountability. Richard tried to provide both. He spent more time with his daughters, actually listening when they talked, actually enforcing consequences when they misbehaved. It was exhausting. He gained new appreciation for everything Naomi had managed while he'd been checked out. One evening, Paige asked, "Do you think Naomi hates us?" Richard considered lying but chose honesty. "I think she's hurt by how we treated her. All of us, including me especially. But hate? No. I think she's just done accepting hurt from us. Could we apologize? Maybe someday. But she needs space right now. And honestly, an apology has to be more than words. We'd have to show her we've changed, not just tell her. How do we do that if she won't talk to us? We become better people whether she sees it or not. We do it because it's right, not because we want something from her." Claire had been quiet, but now she spoke. "I was mean to her. Really mean. I said things I knew would hurt her because I wanted her to leave. Why? Because Mom told me to. And because I was mad that Dad married someone new. But also, she paused, struggling with the words. Because she was nice and that made me feel bad about myself. It was easier to hate her than to deal with how I was acting. Richard pulled his daughter close. We all made mistakes, but we're going to learn from them. We're going to be better. As the weeks passed, Richard stopped trying to contact Naomi. He focused on his daughters, his therapy, his own growth. He started cooking real meals, learned to manage the household, became the present father he should have been all along. Sometimes late at night he thought about Naomi. Wondered if she was happy. Hope she was. The selfish part of him wanted her to be miserable, to regret leaving, to realize she'd made a mistake. But the part of him that was slowly becoming better knew that she deserved happiness. Deserved peace. Deserved a life where she was valued. He'd taken that from her for 5 years. The least he could do now was not take anything more. The divorce was finalized 4 months after Naomi left. No dramatic courtroom scenes. Just signatures on papers and a judge's stamp making official what had been true for a long time. They were done. Richard received the final decree in the mail. He sat at his kitchen table in the apartment that still didn't feel like home and read through the document. Dissolved. That's what the marriage was now. Dissolved like sugar in water until no trace remained. Except traces did remain. In the lessons he was learning. In the relationship he was rebuilding with his daughters. In the kind of man he was slowly, painfully becoming. He'd lost Naomi, lost the family he'd taken for granted, lost the comfort of his old life. But maybe in the wreckage he'd find something worth keeping. Not her. He'd lost the right to her. But possibly a version of himself that could look in the mirror without shame. Would have to be enough. The lawyer's office was cool and professional, all glass and steel in the heart of downtown Charleston. Naomi sat beside Simone, her hands folded calmly in her lap, while across the conference table Richard and his attorney, Patricia, reviewed documents. My client is prepared to agree to all terms, Patricia said, with one request. He'd like the opportunity for supervised visitation with the minor children. The children to whom he has no legal parental rights, Simone responded coolly. The children he never pursued adoption for in 5 years of marriage. He raised them. He was a father figure. Was he? Simone pulled out a document. Because according to my client's detailed logs, Mr. Brooks rarely engaged with Ethan and Elijah beyond superficial interactions. He missed school events, forgot birthdays, and routinely dismissed their emotional needs. That's not entirely fair, Richard said, speaking for the first time. Naomi looked at him directly. Which part isn't fair? The part where you missed Ethan's first school play because you had a golf game? Or the part where you told Elijah to stop crying when he fell and needed stitches because you were watching television? Richard's face flushed. I made mistakes. You did. And now I'm protecting my sons from those mistakes continuing. They're my sons too. No, Naomi said firmly. They're not. They're mine. You had 5 years to be their father, to pursue legal custody, to show up for them. You chose not to. Now you don't get to decide you want that role just because I'm gone. People can change. Then change for your daughters. Change for yourself. But don't expect me to give you access to my children so you can practice being better. The meeting ended with no resolution on visitation. Richard would have no formal custody arrangement with Ethan and Elijah. Simone had been clear. Without adoption papers he had no legal standing. Outside the building, Naomi took a deep breath of summer air. Was I too harsh? You were honest, Simone said. And you protected your children. That's your job as a mother. Part of me feels guilty. Like I should give him another chance. Why? Because women are socialized to be accommodating? Because we're supposed to value everyone's feelings except our own. Simone stopped walking and turned to face Naomi. You gave him 5 years of chances. 5 years of trying to make him see you, hear you, value you. You didn't? That's on him, not you. I know. But it still feels hard. Hard doesn't mean wrong. Remember that. The incident at the law office wasn't Richard's last attempt to insert himself into Naomi's life. 2 weeks later he showed up at Ethan and Elijah's school, trying to check them out early. The school called Naomi immediately. We have him listed as an emergency contact from the old enrollment forms, the principal explained. But he's not on the approved pickup list you submitted when you re-enrolled them here. He's quite insistent. Don't release my children to him, Naomi said firmly, already grabbing her keys. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She arrived to find Richard in the school office, arguing with the secretary. When he saw Naomi, his expression shifted from frustration to something pleading. I just wanted to see them. By trying to take them from school without my permission? I'm their father. Legally you're not. And showing up like this, trying to circumvent my boundaries, proves exactly why those boundaries exist. Naomi turned to the principal. Please update your records to note that Richard Brooks is not authorized to have any contact with my children. If he appears on campus again, call the police. That's extreme, Richard said. What's extreme is you stalking me in Charleston. Showing up at my aunt's house. Now trying to take my kids from school. You need help, Richard. Professional help. And until you get it, you stay away from us. She collected her sons from their classrooms and left without looking back. That evening she filed for a restraining order. The judge granted a temporary order with a full hearing scheduled for 2 weeks later. He's escalating, Simone warned. Men like him, when they lose control, sometimes get dangerous. Richard isn't violent. Not physically, maybe. But he's engaging in a pattern of harassment. That's its own kind of violence. The hearing for the restraining order was tense. Richard presented himself as a concerned ex-husband who only wanted to be part of the children's lives. Naomi presented evidence. The unannounced visit to Charleston, the attempt to take the boys from school, the dozens of emails and calls to her aunt's house despite being asked repeatedly to stop. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Mr. Brooks, I understand that divorce is difficult. But Ms. Brooks has made her boundaries clear. You have no legal custody of these children. Your continued attempts to force contact constitute harassment. I'm granting the restraining order for 1 year, with the stipulation that you engage in continued therapy during this time. Richard left the courtroom looking defeated. Naomi felt no triumph, just tired relief. Meanwhile, her life in Charleston continued to grow. Her role at the gallery expanded. She organized a successful fundraiser that brought in enough money to launch the youth arts program Troy had dreamed about. Local papers covered the event, featuring Naomi's photograph and quotes about the importance of accessible art education. You're famous, Troy teased, showing her the article. Hardly. But it's nice to be recognized for something I'm proud of. You should be proud. This program is going to change lives. They'd settled into an easy friendship over the months. Troy respected her boundaries, never pushing for more, but his interest remained clear in small ways. The way he lit up when she entered a room. The way he remembered details she mentioned in passing. The way he always saved her a cup of the good coffee. Naomi wasn't ready for romance. But she was starting to imagine a future where she might be. Where her life was stable enough, her healing progressed enough, that she could open her heart again. Not to someone who needed her, but to someone who wanted her. Someone who saw her clearly and valued what he saw. One evening, after a particularly successful gallery event, Troy walked her to her car. You were brilliant tonight, he said. The way you connected with donors explained our vision. It was like watching someone in their element. I forgot I was good at this, Naomi admitted. Forgot I had skills beyond managing a household. Richard really did a number on you. He did. But I'm reclaiming myself piece by piece. You're doing more than that. You're building something new. Something better. They stood in the parking lot, city lights reflecting off nearby buildings. Naomi felt the moment stretch, felt the possibility of more hanging in the air between them. Troy, she said carefully, I care about you. As a friend, as a colleague. And maybe someday as something more. But right now, I need to focus on myself and my boys. I need to be whole on my own before I can be part of something with someone else. I know, Troy said gently. And I respect that. There's no rush. I'm not going anywhere. What if someday never comes? What if I decide I'm better alone? Then I'll still be grateful to have you as a friend. But Naomi? Someday will come. Maybe not with me but with someone. Because you're too full of life and love to stay closed off forever. You just need time to remember that you deserve to receive the kind of love you give. His words stayed with her on the drive home. She did give love freely, perhaps too freely in the past. But did she believe she deserved to receive it? That was the question she was still working through in therapy. Dr. Green helped her understand that her pattern of overgiving came from a fear of abandonment rooted in childhood. Her father had left when she was young. Her mother had remarried quickly and often seemed too busy for Naomi's emotional needs. So Naomi had learned to make herself useful, valuable, indispensable. If she gave enough, people would have to stay. But Richard left anyway, Naomi said during one session. He did. Which means your strategy doesn't work. You can't love someone into staying. You can't sacrifice yourself into being valued. Real love, healthy love, doesn't require you to disappear. So what do I do? You practice receiving. Practice letting people give to you. Practice believing you're worthy of care without having to earn it through service. It sounded simple. It felt impossibly hard. But Naomi tried. When Aunt Beverly cooked dinner, she accepted without insisting on doing the dishes. When Simone offered to babysit so Naomi could have an evening alone, she said yes instead of protesting she was fine. When Troy brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, she simply said thank you instead of downplaying the gesture. Small steps toward believing she deserved good things. By fall, 6 months after she'd left Richard, Naomi felt like a different person. Stronger. Clearer. More herself than she'd been in years. The divorce was final. The restraining order was in place. Her business was thriving. Her sons were happy and well-adjusted. She'd built a life worth living. A life that was fully, completely hers. And if Richard was somewhere learning similar lessons, growing into a better version of himself, she was glad for him. But his growth was no longer her concern. She'd done her part by leaving. By showing him through action that his behavior had consequences. Now she was free to live her life without looking back. The conference room felt smaller than it should have, packed with lawyers, documents, and years of unspoken grievances. Naomi sat beside Simone, prepared for what was coming. This was the final divorce hearing, where assets would be divided and the last threads of her marriage would be officially severed. Patricia, Richard's attorney, had requested the meeting to discuss what she called financial discrepancies. Richard looked uncomfortable, his tie slightly crooked, circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. "Let's begin," the mediator said. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. "I've reviewed both parties' financial disclosures. Ms. Brooks, your attorney has raised concerns about financial control during the marriage. Can you elaborate?" Simone slid a stack of documents across the table. "My client was systematically excluded from financial decisions during the marriage. Despite working before they met, she was encouraged to quit her job and become financially dependent. Mr. Brooks maintained sole control of bank accounts, credit cards, and investments. My client was given an allowance for household expenses but had no access to broader financial information." "That's not entirely accurate," Patricia interjected. "My client provided generously for the household." "Providing and including are different things," Simone countered. She pulled out specific bank statements. "Note here how Ms. Brooks requested access to view account balances and was denied. Here's an email where she asked about retirement planning and was told not to worry about it. And here's documentation showing Mr. Brooks opened a credit card in her name without her knowledge and maxed it out, damaging her credit score." Richard shifted in his seat. "That was a mistake. I meant to pay it off before the statement came." "A mistake you made 3 times, Simone said coldly. "Each time telling my client it was handled, each time leaving her credit damaged and her financial independence compromised." The mediator reviewed the documents carefully. "Mr. Brooks, this paints a concerning picture. I was protecting her from stress. She didn't want to deal with financial matters." "That's false," Naomi said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady. "I repeatedly asked to be included in financial decisions. You told me I didn't understand money well enough, that I should trust you to handle it. But you weren't protecting me. You were controlling me. I never restricted what you spent on the household." "No, you didn't. Because household expenses benefited you. But when I wanted to take a class, you said we couldn't afford it. When I wanted to start a small business, you said it was too risky. When I asked to see our tax returns, you told me it was complicated and I wouldn't understand. You kept me dependent and ignorant on purpose." Patricia tried to regroup. "My client acknowledges some mistakes in communication, but financial abuse is a strong accusation." Simone produced another set of documents. Financial abuse is the appropriate term. The IRS defines it as using financial resources to control a partner. Mr. Brooks limited access to accounts, made unilateral decisions without consultation, and damaged Ms. Brooks' credit. Additionally, he underreported income on his financial disclosure for this divorce. My investigator found 3 additional accounts not listed in his initial filings. Richard's face went pale. "Those are old accounts." "With recent activity," Simone said. "One shows a transfer of $15,000 2 weeks before you filed your disclosure. Moving money to hide assets is fraud, Mr. Brooks." The mediator's expression hardened. "Mr. Brooks, is this accurate?" Patricia was flipping through documents frantically. Richard looked at his lawyer, then at Naomi, then down at his hands. "I was trying to protect my retirement." By lying under oath? The mediator's voice was steel. That's perjury. I'll amend the disclosure, Patricia said quickly. You'll do more than that, the mediator said. Given this evidence of financial control and attempted fraud, I'm recommending the judge award Ms. Brooks a significantly higher settlement than initially proposed. Mr. Brooks, you're lucky she's not pressing criminal charges. The hearing continued for another 2 hours, but the outcome was clear. Naomi would receive 70% of the marital assets, including the house she'd inherited but that Richard had convinced her to put into joint tenancy. She'd receive alimony for 3 years, enough to solidify her business and ensure stability for her sons. And Richard would be responsible for all legal fees. The judge will review my recommendations and issue a final ruling within 2 weeks, the mediator concluded. But Mr. Brooks, I strongly suggest you accept these terms. If this goes to court and the judge sees evidence of financial fraud, the consequences will be much worse. As they left the building, Naomi felt lighter than she had in months. Not because of the money, though financial security would help, but because the truth had finally come out. Years of Richard's control, his manipulation, his dismissal of her competence, all documented and validated. You were amazing in there, Simone said. Calm, clear, factual. You didn't let emotion undermine your credibility. I spent months preparing for this, gathering evidence, building the case. I knew he'd try to claim I was exaggerating or emotional. I wasn't going to give him that opportunity. He really thought he could hide assets and get away with it. He's always gotten away with everything. Why would this be different? Naomi shook her head. But not this time. This time there are consequences. 2 days later, Patricia called Simone to say Richard would accept the terms. He didn't want the case to go before a judge. Didn't want his attempted fraud to become public record. He'd sign whatever was necessary to make it go away. Typical, Naomi said when Simone relayed the message. He'll do the right thing only when it benefits him or when he has no other choice. At least it's done. Final divorce decree should be issued within the month. Good. I'm ready to be completely free of him. But closure came in unexpected ways. One evening, about a week after the hearing, Naomi received a message through the lawyer's portal. It was from Claire, Richard's older daughter. Ms. Naomi, this is Claire. I know I'm probably not supposed to contact you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. I was horrible to you and I knew I was being horrible, but I did it anyway. My mom told me you were trying to replace her, and I believed her because it was easier than admitting I was acting like a brat. You tried to be nice to me and I threw it in your face. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I'd forgive me. But I'm in therapy now and my therapist says I need to take accountability. So this is me saying I messed up. I hurt you on purpose. And I'm sorry. I hope you and your boys are happy. You deserve to be happy. Naomi read the message 3 times, her eyes stinging with unexpected tears. She'd never wanted Claire to suffer. Never wanted the girl to carry guilt about the divorce. But the apology felt genuine. Mature. Like maybe Claire was growing into someone better. She wrote back carefully. Claire, thank you for your message. It took courage to send it and I appreciate your honesty. You were a child dealing with a difficult situation, influenced by adults who should have known better. Yes, you hurt me. But I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because holding on to anger at a child serves no one. I hope you continue to grow and learn. I hope you become the kind of woman who stands up for others instead of tearing them down. And I hope your relationship with your dad gets better. He's trying to change and that counts for something. Take care of yourself, Claire. I wish you well. She sent the message and felt something release in her chest. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Didn't mean letting people back into her life. But it meant letting go of the weight of old hurt. It meant choosing peace over punishment. That Saturday, Naomi took Ethan and Elijah to the beach. They built sandcastles, chased waves, collected shells. The sun was bright, the air salty and clean. Her son's laughter rang out across the sand, pure and joyful. Mama, look. Elijah called, holding up a perfect sand dollar. That's beautiful, baby. That's a keeper. She watched her boys play, thought about the life they'd left behind and the life they were building. Thought about Richard in his apartment, hopefully learning to be a better father to his daughters. Thought about Claire working through her guilt in therapy. Thought about herself, here on this beach, finally free. Her phone buzzed with a text from Troy. How's the beach? Perfect, she replied, adding a photo of the boys by the water. You all look happy. We are. And it was true. Simple and true. They were happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because they were safe, valued, and free to be themselves. Sometimes that was all happiness needed to be. As the sun started to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Naomi gathered her sons and headed back to the car. Tomorrow she had work. Next week, a new client consultation. In a month, the gallery's big fall exhibition. Life stretched out ahead of her, full of possibility and promise. She'd weathered the storm, found her strength, built something new from the ruins of what broke. And she was just getting started. Fall arrived in Charleston with cooler temperatures and golden light. The gallery's exhibition season was in full swing, and Naomi found herself busier than she'd ever been. But it was good busy. Purposeful busy. The kind that left her tired at the end of the day but satisfied. "You're glowing," Aunt Beverly observed one evening as they cooked dinner together. Ethan and Elijah were in the living room working on homework. "Am I?" "You are. You look like someone who found her way home." Naomi considered this while chopping vegetables. "I feel that way. Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm meant to do." "And what about that young man at the gallery?" "Troy." Naomi felt herself blush. "What about him?" "Oh, don't play coy with me. I've seen how you light up when you mention his name. How often he finds reasons to text you about work things that probably aren't work things." Naomi laughed. "We're friends? Good friends? Friends who might be something more? Maybe. Someday. When I'm ready." "Baby girl, when will that be? You've been through hell and come out the other side. You've rebuilt your life, your confidence, everything. At some point, you have to let yourself be happy." "I am happy. I meant happy with someone. You deserve partnership, real partnership, not that mess you had with Richard." Troy had indeed become important to Naomi over the months. Their friendship had deepened naturally, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. He made her laugh, challenged her professionally, respected her boundaries. And he was wonderful with Ethan and Elijah on the occasions they stopped by the gallery. But Naomi had been careful. She'd seen what happened when she rushed into things, when she made someone else's needs more important than her own. This time, if she was going to open her heart, it would be slowly, deliberately, with eyes wide open. One evening after a gallery event, Troy asked if they could talk. They sat in his office, the building quiet around them, the city lights visible through the tall windows. "I need to be honest with you," Troy said. "I know you're not ready for a relationship. You've been clear about that and I respect it. But I'm falling for you, Naomi. Maybe I already have fallen. And I need you to know that." Naomi's heart raced. "Troy, let me finish. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not pressuring you. I just want you to know where I stand. You're brilliant and strong and beautiful, and working with you, being around you, it's made me realize what partnership can actually look like. What respect and equality and genuine affection look like. So whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. But if you decide you want something different, or you want to stay friends, or you want to keep focusing on yourself, I'll respect that too." Naomi looked at this man who'd given her space to heal, who'd valued her professionally before anything personal, who'd shown her what it felt like to be seen and appreciated. She thought about Richard, about the ways he'd diminished her. Then she thought about herself, about how far she'd come, about the woman she'd become. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of losing myself again. Scared of making the same mistakes." "Then don't make the same mistakes. Date someone who values you. Someone who sees you clearly and likes what he sees. Someone who understands that real love elevates both people, not just one." "Someone like you?" "I'd like to think so. But you have to decide that." Naomi took a breath, making a choice. "Let's have dinner. Just the two of us. Not a work dinner. A date." Troy's face broke into a smile that made her heart flutter. Yeah. But we're taking it slow. I mean really slow. I need to know that this is real and solid before I involve my sons. Before I let this become something that could affect more than just me. Slow works for me. I'm not going anywhere." They had their first official date the following Saturday. Troy picked her up at Beverly's house, bringing flowers and shaking Aunt Beverly's hand like he was meeting her for the first time, even though they'd met months ago. "You take care of my niece," Beverly said, her tone teasing but her eyes serious. "I plan to," Troy replied. He took her to a small restaurant on the waterfront, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and incredible food. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. About their childhoods, their dreams, their failures and fears. It felt easy in a way Naomi had forgotten relationships could be. "Tell me about your marriage," Troy said gently. "Not if you're not ready. But I want to understand where you're coming from." Naomi considered her words carefully. "I spent 5 years trying to be enough for someone who was never going to see my worth. I shrank myself to fit into his life, his vision, his needs. And even then it wasn't enough. He wanted someone to manage his world without having opinions or needs of her own. And I let that happen because I thought love meant sacrifice. What do you think love means now? I think it means partnership. Mutual support. Being able to grow without shrinking your partner to make room. It means respecting boundaries and celebrating successes and sharing burdens equally. She met his eyes. Do you think that's possible? I know it is. My parents have been married 40 years and that's what they have. They lift each other up, challenge each other, but they never diminish each other. That sounds nice. It is. And it's what I want. What I think we could build together, given time. The date ended with a simple kiss, gentle and full of promise. Naomi drove home feeling hopeful in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not hopeful that Troy would complete her or fix her problems, but hopeful that maybe, just maybe, she could share her life with someone without losing herself in the process. Over the next few months, Naomi and Troy dated carefully. He took her to art shows and concerts. She introduced him to her favorite bookstore and the coffee shop where she liked to work. They went on hikes with Ethan and Elijah, Troy patiently teaching them about local plants and animals. He never tried to be their father. Just a kind adult who enjoyed their company. I like Mr. Troy, Elijah said one evening before bed. He's fun. He is fun, Naomi agreed. Is he your boyfriend? Naomi smiled at her son's directness. Maybe. Is that okay with you? I guess. As long as he's nice to you. And as long as he doesn't tell you what to do like Richard did. The comparison stung, a reminder that her sons had seen more of her old marriage's dysfunction than she'd realized. Mr. Troy treats me with respect. And if he ever didn't, we wouldn't be together. Okay. Okay, Mama. By winter, Naomi and Troy had been dating for 4 months. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. He respected her independence, celebrated her successes, supported her through challenges without trying to take over or fix things for her. One December evening after the boys were asleep, Naomi sat on Beverly's porch wrapped in a blanket, looking at the stars. Her phone rang. Simone. It's official, her friend said without preamble. Divorce decree recorded. Settlement transferred. You're completely, legally, officially free. It's really over. It's really over. How do you feel? Naomi thought about it. Relieved. Grateful. Ready. Ready for what? Whatever comes next. I built this new life piece by piece. Got myself back piece by piece. And now I get to enjoy it. You deserve that. You deserve all the good things coming your way. After the call ended, Naomi sent Troy a text. Want to come over tomorrow? I have news to celebrate. He replied immediately. I'll bring champagne. The next evening they sat in Beverly's living room, glasses of champagne in hand. The boys were with Simone for a sleepover, giving Naomi a rare night alone. To freedom, Troy said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, Naomi added. They clinked glasses and drank. Then Troy set his glass down, suddenly serious. I love you, he said simply. I know we're taking it slow and I'm not asking you to say it back. But I needed you to know. I love who you are, who you're becoming. The mother you are to your boys, the professional you are at work, the woman you are when it's just us. All of it. I love all of it. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears. Happy ones. I love you too. It scares me a little because the last time I loved someone, I lost myself. But with you I feel like I'm finding more of myself. Like loving you makes me more me, not less. That's how it should be. I know that now. Thank you for being patient with me. For giving me space to heal. Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me with your heart after everything you've been through. They kissed and Naomi felt something settle deep in her soul. This was right. This was real. This was the kind of love she'd always deserved but never believed was possible. Later, as she lay in bed replaying the evening, Naomi thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of her marriage. The courage it took to leave. The hard work of rebuilding. The slow process of learning to trust again. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Tomorrow she'd wake up and continue building her life. Working at the gallery. Raising her sons. Loving a man who saw her clearly and valued what he saw. Living fully and freely in the life she'd created. She'd disappeared from Richard's world, yes. But she'd reappeared in her own. Stronger, clearer, more herself than ever. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Richard sat in his therapist's office, the same chair he'd occupied every Wednesday for the past 8 months. Dr. Martinez looked at him with her usual patient expression, waiting for him to speak. "The divorce is final," Richard said. "Papers came last week." "How does that feel?" "Like failure. Like the end of something I should have fought harder for." "Do you still believe you could have saved the marriage?" Richard was quiet for a long moment. "No. Not after everything that came out. The financial stuff, the way I treated her, the way I let my daughters treat her. She couldn't have stayed without losing herself completely." "That's growth, Richard. Recognizing that doesn't make it feel better." "It's not supposed to feel better. It's supposed to feel true. And truth can be uncomfortable." Richard had been making progress in therapy, though it was slow and painful work. He'd confronted his control issues, his fear of vulnerability, his pattern of dismissing others' needs in favor of his own comfort. He'd examined his childhood, his parents' marriage, the way he'd internalized toxic ideas about relationships and gender roles. But understanding why he'd behaved badly didn't erase the consequences. At work, word had spread about the divorce and the accusations of financial abuse. He hadn't been fired, but he'd been passed over for a major promotion. His boss had been diplomatic about it, citing the need for someone with more bandwidth. But Richard understood the subtext. They didn't trust him the way they used to. His social circle had shifted too. Couples they'd been friends with during the marriage had largely sided with Naomi. Not openly but in quiet ways. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unreturned. He'd become the cautionary tale. The example of how not to treat your spouse. The isolation was fitting, if painful. The bigger challenge was Claire and Paige. They were in family therapy now, all three of them together, working through the damage that had been done. The girls were dealing with guilt about their role in the marriage's breakdown, anger at their mother for encouraging their behavior, and confusion about their own identities. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be," Claire admitted during one session. "I spent so long being mean to Naomi because Mom said that's what I should do. Now I'm supposed to be different, but I don't know how." "You start by making different choices," the family therapist, Dr. Patel, suggested. "By recognizing when you're being unkind and choosing kindness instead." "But what if being kind makes me look weak?" "Who taught you that kindness is weakness?" Dr. Patel asked gently. Claire looked at Richard and he felt the weight of her gaze. He'd taught her that. Through his actions with Naomi, he taught his daughter that consideration was weakness. That caring about others' feelings made you lesser. That real strength looked like dominance and control. What a terrible legacy. "I'm sorry," Richard said to his daughters, not for the first time but with renewed sincerity. "I taught you the wrong things about relationships. About how to treat people. I showed you a terrible example with Naomi, and you learned from that. But we're all going to do better now." "How?" Paige asked. She was younger but often more direct than her sister. "By practicing. By catching ourselves when we're being dismissive or cruel. By apologizing when we mess up. By treating people the way they deserve to be treated, not the way we can get away with treating them." It sounded simple. The execution was harder. Richard noticed his own patterns constantly now. The urge to dismiss others' concerns when they were inconvenient. The impulse to make decisions without consulting people they affected. The tendency to prioritize his comfort over others' dignity. These patterns didn't disappear just because he saw them. But seeing them was the first step toward changing them. One evening, Claire came to him holding her phone. "I sent Naomi an apology through the lawyer's portal. She wrote back." "What did she say?" "That she forgives me. That she hopes I grow into someone kind." Claire's eyes were wet. "Do you think I can be someone kind?" Richard pulled his daughter close. "I know you can. You've already started. Recognizing what you did wrong, apologizing, wanting to be better, all of that is kindness. I was so mean to her, Dad. I said terrible things. Did terrible things. Why would she forgive me? Because she's better than us. Better than we were, at least. She chose peace over punishment. We should learn from that." That conversation stayed with Richard. Naomi's ability to forgive, to let go of justified anger, showed a strength he'd never appreciated when they were married. He'd mistaken her kindness for weakness, her generosity for doormat behavior. But it took incredible strength to extend grace to people who'd hurt you. He tried to apply that lesson with his daughters. When they made mistakes, which they did frequently, he corrected them with firmness but also patience. He explained not just what they'd done wrong but why it mattered. He held them accountable while also helping them learn. Slowly the household stabilized. Claire's grades improved. Paige's nightmares decreased. They learned to do chores without being asked multiple times. They learned to consider others' feelings before acting. They learned that being a good person took constant work. One Saturday morning, Richard took the girls to volunteer at a local food bank. They sorted donations, packed boxes, interacted with families who needed help. On the drive home, Paige was thoughtful. Those people were nice. Even though they needed help, they were nice to us. Needing help doesn't make you a bad person, Richard said. And giving help doesn't make you superior. We're all just people trying to make it through. Naomi tried to teach us that, Claire said quietly from the back seat. Remember when she wanted us to volunteer with her? We refused and Mom said it was stupid. Your mom was wrong. And I was wrong for backing her up instead of supporting Naomi. Do you think we'll ever see Naomi again? Paige asked. Richard considered the question carefully. I don't know. She's building a new life. She deserves that space. Maybe someday, years from now, our paths will cross again. But even if they don't, we can honor what she tried to do for us by becoming better people. The girls were quiet, processing this. Then Claire said, I hope she's happy. I hope wherever she is, whatever she's doing, she's happy. Me too, Richard said. And he meant it. Despite the pain, despite the loss, despite everything, he genuinely hoped Naomi had found joy. Months continued to pass. Richard's life settled into a new rhythm. Work, therapy, parenting, repeat. He went on a few dates but nothing serious. He wasn't ready and honestly he didn't trust himself yet. He needed more time to change, to heal, to become someone worthy of partnership. He read books about emotional intelligence, about breaking generational patterns, about raising strong daughters. He joined a men's group that focused on healthy masculinity and accountability. He did the work. One evening, almost a year after Naomi had left, Richard received an email from his ex-wife, Jennifer. It was the first communication they'd had since that tense phone call months earlier. I saw the pictures of the girls volunteering. They looked different. Happier. You're doing a good job with them, Richard. Better than I thought you would. Better than I'm doing with my own life, honestly. I'm sorry for encouraging them to treat Naomi badly. I was bitter and hurt and I used our daughters as weapons. That was wrong. I'm working on being better, but I wanted you to know I see what you're doing with them. Keep it up. Richard read the email 3 times. It wasn't a full apology, but it was acknowledgement. It was Jennifer taking some responsibility. And it confirmed what he'd suspected. They'd all been part of the problem. They'd all contributed to the toxic environment that had driven Naomi away. He wrote back simply, "Thank you. We're all learning. Doing better. I hope you find your peace too." That night, Richard looked at his life with clear eyes. He lost so much. His marriage, his reputation, his sense of himself as a good person. But he'd gained something too. Self-awareness. Accountability. A real relationship with his daughters built on honesty instead of avoidance. It wasn't the life he'd planned. But maybe it was the life he'd needed. He thought about Naomi sometimes, wondered how she was doing. He'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she was thriving. Working at a gallery. Running her own consulting business. Happy. He was glad for her. And he carried the lesson of her departure with him every day. When you treat people as disposable, eventually they dispose of you. When you make someone invisible, eventually they disappear. When you tell someone to take care of their own, they might actually do it. And you'll be left holding the wreckage of what you destroyed, forced to either rebuild or drown in the ruins. Richard chose to rebuild. Not because he expected forgiveness or redemption, but because living with the truth of who he'd been was too painful. He had to become someone different. Someone better. For his daughter's sake. For his own sake. And in some small way, to honor the woman who'd given him 5 years of patience he'd never deserved and whose absence had finally taught him what her presence never could. That love isn't ownership. Partnership isn't control. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from someone who doesn't value them. Naomi had been brave. Now Richard was trying to be better. It was the least he could do. 1 year and 2 months after Naomi had disappeared from Richard's life, she stood on a stage in front of 200 people, microphone in hand, about to give the opening speech for the gallery's biggest exhibition yet. Troy stood in the wings, giving her an encouraging smile. Ethan and Elijah sat in the front row with Aunt Beverly, their faces bright with pride. Simone was there too, along with clients, friends, and members of Charleston's growing arts community. "Good evening," Naomi began, her voice steady and strong. "When I came to Charleston just over a year ago, I was lost. I'd forgotten who I was underneath all the roles I'd tried to fill. Wife, stepmother, household manager. I'd made myself small trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for me. And one night I just stopped. Stopped shrinking. Stopped accommodating. Stopped accepting less than I deserved." She looked out at the audience, seeing attentive faces, people leaning forward to hear her story. "This exhibition is called Emergence. and it features artists who found themselves after periods of darkness, who rebuilt after breaking, who became more authentically themselves through struggle. Looking at their work these past months as we prepared this show, I saw my own journey reflected back. The courage it takes to start over, the strength required to stand in your truth, the beauty that comes from refusing to stay small. The speech continued, but the details faded for Naomi as she spoke. What mattered was this moment. Standing in front of people, owning her story, using her voice. The old Naomi would have been terrified. Would have worried about saying the wrong thing, taking up too much space, seeming too confident. The new Naomi understood that her voice had value, that her story mattered, that taking up space wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The exhibition opening was a massive success. Art sold, connections were made, and the gallery's youth program received enough donations to expand for another year. As the evening wound down, Troy found Naomi in his office, taking a quiet moment alone. "You were incredible up there," he said. "I felt incredible. Is that okay to say? I felt powerful and present and completely myself." "It's more than okay. It's beautiful." He kissed her gently and Naomi leaned into it, feeling safe and valued and loved. They'd been together 8 months now, taking it slow but steady. He'd met her extended family. She'd met his parents. They talked about the future in careful, hopeful terms. "I think I'm ready," Naomi said. "Ready for what?" "For this to be more than taking it slow. For you to be a real part of my life, the boys' lives. Not rushing into anything foolish but not holding back from fear either." Troy's face broke into a huge smile. "You mean it?" "I mean it. You've shown me what partnership can look like. What respect and equality and genuine affection look like. And I want that. I want us." They held each other in the quiet office while the celebration continued outside. It was a small moment, private and perfect. A choice made not from desperation or fear but from clarity and hope. The following weekend, Naomi took Troy and the boys to the beach where she'd scattered her fears a year ago. They played in the waves, built sandcastles, collected shells. Troy taught Ethan how to skip stones while Elijah searched for crabs in the shallow water. Naomi watched them, her heart full. This was her family now. Not the traditional structure she tried to force with Richard, but something more authentic. A chosen family built on love and respect. "Mama, come help," Elijah called, waving her over. She joined them, letting the water lap at her feet, feeling the sun warm on her shoulders. Troy put his arm around her waist naturally and she leaned into him. "This is perfect," she said softly. "It really is." Later that evening, after the boys were asleep at Beverly's house, Naomi and Troy sat on the porch with glasses of wine. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. "Can I ask you something?" Troy said. "Always. Do you ever regret it? Leaving Richard, blowing up your life, starting over?" Naomi thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I regret how long I stayed. All the years I wasted trying to fix something that was broken from the start. But leaving? Starting over? Never. It was the hardest thing I've ever done and the best decision I ever made. He reached out to me, a few months ago." Naomi sat up straighter. "Richard contacted you?" "Through email. Said he'd heard I was seeing you. Wanted to make sure I was treating you right. It was actually kind of decent of him." "What did you say?" "That you deserve to be treated like the incredible woman you are, and that I was trying my best to do that every day. I told him you'd moved on and built something beautiful, and that he should focus on his own healing rather than monitoring yours." "How did he respond?" "He didn't. But I think he got the message." Naomi processed this. Part of her was touched that Richard cared enough to check on her well-being. A larger part was annoyed that he'd felt entitled to insert himself into her life. But mostly she felt nothing. Richard was her past. This life, this man, these moments, they were her present and future. "For what it's worth," Naomi said, "I hope he's doing well. I hope he's learned from everything that happened. But I don't need to know. He's not my responsibility anymore." "That's healthy. It's freedom." Autumn deepened into winter. Naomi's consulting business continued to thrive. She hired an assistant, then another consultant. What had started as freelance work to regain independence had become a legitimate company. She was thinking about office space, about expansion, about the future. Her relationship with Troy deepened naturally. He was wonderful with Ethan and Elijah, never trying to replace Richard but carving out his own role as a caring adult in their lives. The boys adored him, especially when he let them help with art projects at the gallery. One December evening, Troy took Naomi to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the water. She wore a green dress she'd bought without guilt or permission, her natural curls styled beautifully. She felt gorgeous and confident. "You're staring," she said, catching Troy watching her. "Can't help it. You're radiant." Over dinner they talked about everything. The gallery's success, her business growth, the boys' upcoming school winter concert. Then Troy grew serious. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "About us." "Me too. I don't want to rush you. But I also don't want to pretend I'm content with ambiguity. I love you, Naomi. I love your sons. I want to build a life with you. Not tomorrow, not on any specific timeline, but eventually. I want you to know that's where I'm headed." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears. "I want that too. Maybe not marriage right away, I'm still recovering from the last one. But partnership? Building something together? Yes. Absolutely yes." That's all I needed to know. They held hands across the table, the city lights reflecting off the water beyond the windows. Naomi felt peace settle in her bones. This was right. This was real. This was what she deserved. On New Year's Eve, Naomi hosted a party at the house she'd officially bought with her divorce settlement. It wasn't the big house she'd shared with Richard, but a cozy place with a yard for the boys and an office where she could work. It was entirely hers, decorated to her taste, filled with her choices. Friends crowded the living room. Simone was there with her new girlfriend. Aunt Beverly held court in the kitchen, telling stories. Troy kept the boys entertained with magic tricks. Colleagues from the gallery mingled with consulting clients. It was a celebration of life, of new beginnings, of joy hard won. At midnight, as everyone counted down, Naomi stood on her back porch looking at the stars. Troy found her there just as the clock struck 12. "Happy New Year," he said, pulling her close. "Happy New Year." They kissed while fireworks exploded in the distance, and Naomi felt complete. Not because she had a man, but because she had herself. Her strength, her voice, her life rebuilt on her own terms. She'd disappeared from Richard's world when he told her to take care of her own. And she'd done exactly that. Taking care of herself, her sons, her dreams. Built something beautiful from the ashes of what broke. This was her revenge. Not cruelty, not punishment, but joy. Living well. Thriving. Refusing to let his words, his dismissal, his neglect define her. She'd emerged from the water. She'd found the sun. She'd become who she was always meant to be. And in that becoming she'd found everything she'd been missing. Purpose, peace, love, and the unshakable knowledge of her own worth. Richard had said, "Take care of your own."